young people around the world want to see change. Join your co-hosts, William, Anastasia, and George, as they speak to young leaders from around the world on their stories, their struggles, and most importantly, their incredible impact. In season 2 of this podcast, be ready to get inspired. This is where action begins, and this is the Young Changemakers podcast.
So hi, Jaiksana, and welcome to the Young Changemakers podcast. It's great to have you on board of our second season. And to the listeners, I was fortunate enough to meet Jaiksana at the Global Youth Summit back in July of last year. So Jaiksana, it's great to be able to speak to you again today, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, yay! I think I'm the first person on the second episode. So I'm really excited about this. And this is really amazing. I'm happy to be speaking on this podcast. Also because the Global Changemakers has been, for me, one of the most important and one of the experiences that have really shaped me positively. And I've spoken to actually one of my creed. I started my work because I've seen a lot of things that I want to make a change around, or, educate people on changing them. And a lot of the people, for example, if you look at them in the context of the refugee camp, they are pushed by this passion to be able to change things. And at most times, you find that the skills to be able to do that is lacking. And I'm happy that when I was at the Changemakers Summit, I was able to actually earn the skills to be able to create the change that we all wanna create. So I'm really happy to connect back again with you, George. And yay to the second season.
So what do you think are the sort of the key skills or learnings you've taken away from the summit and that you've been able to use in your work?
Yeah, perfect. So for me, and I think one of the most important things that I've really taken out from the summit is understanding how to do trainings. And what I also like so much about that segment of the program is that after the summit, the Changemakers came up with the guide, the training guide that enables people to basically become trainers wherever they are. And it has amazing icebreakers. It has amazing place that you can, bring to create that engagement during your programs and session. So I thought that was really important. And also the Changemakers, this has not happened a lot with me, but one of the programs that for me I thought was really a great takeoff was the marketplace. So people who have not been there, they set up basically different rooms with different, experts to talk on specific topics that are of interest to the Changemakers. And there was sessions on how you can write, evaluate your projects. There was become better at using social media to be able to push your campaigns or fundraise and all of that. So I thought that was really amazing. I mean, no one really gets the opportunity to earn a lot of skills in one day, and I think the Changemakers just did amazing in their programming.
No, definitely. And that was a jam-packed week at the Global Youth Summit there. We learned such a variety of skills, but I think for me personally, just being able to connect with people like yourself, Jaiksana, is incredible because I'm learning a lot from, meeting people from different cultures and how you sort of respond to problems and approach things is, I think, invaluable in how I can take lessons from that. Jaiksana, I'm really keen to get to know yourself personally a bit better. So would you mind just giving us an insight and background into your upbringing in South Sudan?
Yeah, sure. So I've not grown up in South Sudan. I am twice over a refugee now. The first time my mother moved in 1992 or 3, they moved to Uganda when the war between the North Sudan and the Southern Sudan, or then Southern Sudan, was still ongoing. And because of that, my family and my siblings were all born in the refugee camp. And yeah, so in 2005, the government of Sudan and the Northern Sudan and South Sudan signed what they call the Comprehensive Peace Agreement (CPA), which finally led to the secession of South Sudan in 2011, becoming an independent nation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved back to South Sudan barely years after the agreement was signed. And then, yeah, a lot of people, more especially myself, had the hope that now we have our own country. Because if you look at the landscape of the conflict that triggered this history of division was grounded in, religious differences, cultural differences, and marginalization of people in the South. So a lot of people felt that, okay, now we're an independent country. We now get to decide about our destiny. We get to co-create the vision for this country that we've been fighting for. But unfortunately, in 2013, war erupted again, and this was really a moment that for me shocked me, because even if I've heard of war before, I've not been physically on the battleground, or I've not seen people physically fight, because my parents went to Uganda. We were born in the refugee camp, so I know a little more about like what it means to grow up as a refugee, and all of that. But in 2013, the first bullet that was shot to signal the war was actually shot next to our home. I was in Juba in December 2013. I mean, I moved to Juba after completing my high school. The idea is that you're done with high school, go have a little bit of time out in the capital city. And also that was a Christmas season, and Christmas is a big thing here in South Sudan, and also I think a lot of countries in Africa. And so that's why I moved to the capital city, and I was staying in this place, a nice home of one of our relatives that is next to the town, and so that was my perfect story. But in December, while we were sitting down watching television in the home, we have this colleague who stays in the neighborhood. He ran into the house and said, "Hey, you guys, can you reduce the volume of the TV? It seems there's something really horrible happening outside." And we have known that guy for being a drunkard, a person who drinks all the time. So everyone was laughing. Let's continue with the movie. And we actually, I think, increased the volume of the movie just to like cut him out.
Right. Yeah.
But a few seconds more, we started hearing really heavy guns going out, and then that was when we stopped playing the movie, and everyone was shocked what was happening outside. And that day marked the start of the conflict. I was stuck in the house for days, and life really was difficult. I was far away from my parents. My mother was working as a teacher in Yei, which happens to be my hometown. My dad also works in Yei, which is 100 miles away from the capital city. And life was difficult. My mental state was really going insane because of the events that were unraveling. There was, and one of the biggest problems that I think I remember is that in Juba, there's no running water that is connected. There's people who move with tanks, and then they take the water on these tanks from house to house. So everyone has to have a huge tank in the compound, and this is where they put the water when the tanks go around, these huge vehicles. During the conflict, that was difficult to happen. Like there's no water. So One thing that I remember is that like almost everyone in the neighborhood ran out of water. One thing that was also really difficult is that we can get food because you have to go to the market to buy food, and the market was no longer there. So everyone in our neighborhood basically ran out of food and water. and leave out the fact that you wanted to bathe and clean your body. That was a luxury at the moment. So all the water that we had in the house was reserved for drinking. So I called my parents to talk to them because the few days when the conflict was happening, the telecommunication networks were shut down by the government to avoid the rebels or the people who are rebelling from coordinating. So we were cut out of communication. So everyone was basically in darkness. After a few days, when the network came back, I spoke with my father, and that was the first time he told me about the war that happened, and then moved them to refuge in Uganda in the first place.
Sure.
And he told me to stand strong and keep praying and meditating, and that, I mean, everything would be fine. And yeah, I sort of took that as a motivation to sort of keep strong. But like, I could hear guns basically everywhere. And one thing that shocked me is that, so South Sudan, after we gained independence, a lot of people from Uganda, Kenya, and all the other neighboring countries moved to South Sudan basically to do business and stuff. Most of these people, because the war was, like I said before, it started in the middle of the town. They were pushed out of the houses that they stayed because a lot of the people either sleep in their shops, which are burned down, all of that.
Yep.
And I could literally see people running on the street. They want to run this road, and then they hear guns, and then they run back, and then they hear guns. And it was a lot of frustration. And like, I couldn't take those moments in. And it took me a while after this whole conflict to get myself back to my normal mind state and process all that information and stuff.
Jaiksana, so I mean,
Yes.
what age were you when the war broke out in 2013?
So in 2013, I remember that was after I completed my high school. And just a second too.
Because I mean, it's very hard for me to visualize and even understand and empathize with someone who's been in a civil war. I think a good question now to ask you is, how do you think that context and having those life and personal experiences as a refugee shaped you into what you believe is important in today's world and for the people of your own country? It's shaped your worldview incredibly differently to people who have grown up in a safe world that they don't usually unexposed to such atrocities.
Yeah. So I perfectly remember those events happened. I was 17 years old. My birthday is August, and so I was barely 2 months, years into being 17. And yeah, so one of the ways that I think all these events have helped shape the way that I look at the world, and also for me, I think strongly the work that I'm doing right now, is that I've always thought that if I had the power, one thing that I would do is to find that item or that ingredient or that thing that would make politicians or people solve conflict peacefully without the element of resorting to war and violence. And so for me, when I look at the landscape of the people who are affected by the war, young people are disproportionately affected by the conflict. And one, because they are used as the people to fight against the other communities. If you look at in 2013 when the conflict started, the army group that was fighting for the rebel leader, Dr. Riek Machar, was what they called the White Army. And the White Army was basically a lot of young people mobilized together, and they are given this agenda that these people or these communities want to wipe you out, and if you don't fight back, you're basically going to be all of you are going to be destroyed, your villages are going to be burned, and all of that. So a lot of the people, young people, with that training, with that uniform, and with that all the necessary preparation that prepares someone to work in the military, all these young people just got guns or were given guns, and then they were armed to fight a very senseless war that they completely have no idea how it started and how it benefits them. And a lot of people, I think one of the most powerful way to be able to change the status quo is to be able to educate people. And for me, building the capacity of young people to be able to take action is one of the things that I do every day. And also in terms of like communication and hate speech, which we will, I think, go into later, young people are both on the receiving and the sending side of information. And that is because they are exposed to technologies. But there's very low levels of digital literacy. So you find that young people are either influenced to send very denigrative messages against other people on the internet, and that later is transferred to people communicating the same messages from phone and text messages, and then from word of mouth from one person to another, and leading to actual conflicts in the country. So for me, being able to change the capacity, to build the capacity of the young people and then change their mindset is one of the most important things that I'm doing, because my life, basically, because of all these displacements and war, I've struggled with education, and a lot of people right now in the refugee camp have issues accessing social services like medical services, being able to go to a good school and all of that. And so for me, I just really want people to be able to live peacefully, and young people not being exposed to the trauma that they're exposed to right now, and children as well. And that can only happen when people know exactly that we are young people. They understand that we can together build the vision of the country that we want. And then that, if they know that they can be able to sort of stand against the manipulation of politicians that are, trying to bring their own personal gains and into a political thing that get people to fight against each other.
Hi there. We hope you're enjoying this episode so far. We just wanted to let you know that we're on social media at WeAreGCM. And don't hesitate to follow us. And if you'd like to support us further, we also have a Patreon page. Type in Global Changemakers and decide which tier is best for you. And now, on with the rest of the episode. Yeah, in doing a bit of prior reading and research before this conversation, Jaiksana, I read that the literacy rate was only at 20% in South Sudan. And yeah, I can understand that must be difficult for people to sort of create hope without a proper education. And also, in most of these refugee camps, there must still be people's mindsets are still predominantly shaped around the landscape of war and the history of war. So this, I think, ties in nicely into my next question is, so how have you begun to use social media and digital literacy to strengthen these voices and support the actions of peace building amongst youth in particular?
Perfect. Yeah. And yeah, so if you look at in the refugee camp, a lot of the people, basically their mindset is shaped either by events that have happened to them personally or by the situation going in the country. And there's also this cross-border exchange of information between people in South Sudan and in the refugee camp, where you get a call from South Sudan, and the information could be true or not true. You hear examples that I wanted to bring around is when we came to the refugee camp, there was an information, a photo that was really going viral. And the photo had a picture of a woman, her head was cut off. And the caption that came with the picture via WhatsApp and other social media platform says that a tribal group in South Sudan attacked another one and cut cut people's heads and things like that. And then this picture was circulating as the evidence of that. Now, the people in the refugee camp who come from the other tribe were all very enraged, and they want to either pay back or they want to, just show their anger and discomfort, and that creates a lot of tension between the people that live in the refugee camp.
Right.
In 2017, I think 17 or 18, something happened, and for me, that is an example of already this loop of information that is going on between South Sudan and Uganda, and also coming from the internet, that is affecting people in the refugee camp. In 2000, happening, there was young people who sat down to watch the football match, and then one person from one community to take a piece, and he left his chair. While he was out, another person from another community took his chair and sat on it. When he came back, he asked why you took my chair, and they started fighting. After the match was done, each of them went home. What people didn't know is that that night, these communities would go and mobilize each other to come and fight. And so people poured in the refugee camp. Up to 4 people died, and hundreds of others displaced from one village in the refugee camp called TIGGER. And so this is an example of, just the chair acting as a trigger, but already there was this tension that has been built over time, and most of them are attributed to rumors, fake news on the internet, and basically hate speech. And so when we came to the refugee camp, I, for myself, also noticed some of these issues that were happening and the level of tension that exists between young people. And so we created a program called Peace Village. So the Peace Village was a digital literacy and hate speech mitigation program. And we decided to use a very hybrid approach where we bring art and training together. And so what we did is we decided to do camp. And in the refugee camps, we used an approach where we train 25 people in every cluster, right? And so those meetings normally run for 1 to 4 or 5 hours. And in this conversation, we talk about hate speech. We talk about fake news on the internet. How do you identify fake news? And how do you report? How do you make sure that you actually guard yourself and your communities from hate speech? And also just looking at the code of conduct for social media. If you're on social media, how do you interact so that you're not able to trigger conflict? And then what we also did is to
I might just interrupt. Sorry, Jaiksana. Would you mind getting a better a bit more of a definition on hate speech? Because that's a new term for me. And what exactly is it being used politically as a form of being able to sort of divide and separate the civil society as a sort of power strategy by some of these politicians?
Perfect. So hate speech, there's no universally agreed upon definition of hate speech, but hate speech is basically any kind of communication that targets someone on the basis of their belonging to a certain group. And these groups can be religious groups, can be race, can be tribal or ethnic, like the case of South Sudan. And this kind of communication is really very dangerous if it's not mitigated. And I would just like to give a quick example of one hate speech that has been really recorded and noted in history as one thing that triggered the conflict in Rwanda. In Rwanda, a radio station broadcasted that one of the communities in Rwanda were cockroaches, right? So these people were identified as cockroaches. They were denigrated as basically non-humans. And that gives people the motivation that they don't actually matter, right? Um, and in South Sudan, there's different terms that have been used. Um, there's a certain community that is referred to as cows, and they are using this to sort of initiate that these are people who don't understand, right? Because you basically know the behaviors of a cow. You can really compare that with a human being, and so that is sort of the denigration that they're bringing around. There's also a very common hate speech term in South Sudan called MTN. So MTN is one of the biggest telecommunication network, I think, in Africa. It's in South Sudan, Uganda, and basically a lot of the countries that I've gone to, they have the MTN network. And so they are using this term in South Sudan to sort of refer to a certain community that they are basically everywhere in South Sudan. And the point here is that they are trying to present this community as a community that is everywhere, that are potentially going to rob people of their land, that is potentially going to take away the privileges, homes and whatever. And then it gives the people who are in their homes and in their towns the motivation to attack these people before their land and all of that is taken away. There's also others that are used to refer to people in the Equatoria. Some of them are called Dor, and some of them are called women. So the people in the Equatoria are women. And so terms like this has been used in South Sudan to be able to target people on the basis of their tribal belonging or origin. You would find that a person comes from, and more especially this has been really common and evident when people were moving to the refugee camp. And I think it also happened to us. We were stopped by a couple of rebel groups, and they would always ask you, do you have MTN in the car? And so this is how people are targeted. And if you are stopped by the militia group that was run by the government, you also get asked if they have door or women in the car. And so these are sort of like the terms that have been used to be able to trigger people. But this is just the lesser example that only are around the use of, very inflammatory terms. But also there were incidences where people spread rumors and fake information against other communities. And one really common one was one where a person sent a message on WhatsApp, and the message really got forwarded a lot of times by a lot of people from one person to another. And the message says that a Biden general in South Sudan was planning to attack all people from the Equatorial region. So what happened is that people from the Equatorial region all panicked, and people wanted to defend themselves. And there's this really common notion in South Sudan that attack is the best way of defense, right? So once you get this kind of threats, even if they are true or not true, they are likely to spark a conflict between people because everyone really want to attack first before they attack. And so you can see how information plays a very huge role in fueling the conflict in South Sudan. And so just back to what we do now in our work in Uganda is we try to bring people together to train them to be able to understand what is true and what is not. Because if you see a picture of a person with the head cut out and then they say these are people from the community, if you don't have the trained eye to be able to verify and see if the information is true or not, you're likely to take it as the true information. And that's sort of how the information spread in the camp. So just being able to train what I would term vigilantes in the refugee camps, who are able to verify information, who are able to tell people that if this looks too alarming or too good to be true, this could be fake information and all of that.
I see.
So that is sort of what we've been doing. Yeah.
That's some of the work you've been doing through your platform, iAfrica, Platform Africa. Is that one of your?
Platform Africa.
Can you explain a bit more about that program? And I've also just watched one of your music videos, your hit "Peace for All" music video. How has music been powerful in giving people that platform to raise their voice?
So one of the approaches that I was talking about already, we did training, but one of the approaches that we use in our programs to be able to, harness the influence and potential of art in being able to send positive and educational messages to people, and also in raising awareness about the consequences of conflict and being able to preach that we can live together. And so we did the what we call the peace peace for all song, and it came out of like a number of workshops and programs that we had together, where people come together and do poetry. And this is one of the programs that we do as part of the Peace Village, to bring people together to tell their stories using art and poetry and music and all of that. And so when we were doing this in the refugee camp, a lot of people were like, "Yo, why don't we record a song?" And this is one of the things that I love about the music, of the music and the song, is that it wasn't part of a project where we planned that, okay, one of the deliverables or the outcome of the project should be a music video. We didn't think about that. It sort of like came spontaneously when we had these, engagements with artists and poems who are and poets who are in the refugee camp. And it's like, why don't we do a music song about people living together? And so we brought people together, and I contributed to inviting like a huge portion of the lyrics of the song. And then we had the Peace for All song. And for me, the song really spoke to a lot of people. It was a hit song that played in a lot of radio stations in South Sudan. So we're happy that even if we did the song in the refugee camp, it's still able to reach people in South Sudan. And a lot of the musicians who took part in the project were interviewed by a number of big media houses. For example, the Enemies Run radio station in South Sudan called Radio Miraya. We had a couple of people be interviewed on that platform because everyone really liked the concept that we can only have peace because this is what we want to work for. And the song is saying we can reap what we sow. So it's just speaking to everyone that if you really want peace, you better start working for it.
Sure.
And just the fact that it's done by refugees, for me, was one of the highlights of the project.
Wow. Like, yeah, I can see how using those platforms and specifically music can be really powerful in giving everyone one common voice. It must be really rewarding to see some of the youth that you're working with start to understand the complex and often misinterpreted sort of history that's come through in South Sudan, and then they're starting to share the message of peace. It must be really powerful. What's some of the projects that you're currently working on now, Jaiksana? You're in Rhino refugee camp in the north of Uganda, am I right?
Yeah. Yes, so I'm in the northern Uganda in a refugee camp called Rhino Camp. This is where I work, and this is my home as well. So Rhino Camp, just for sake of background, it's the home to, I think now, over 130,000 refugees. It's I like that the people, the refugees, are being able to, coordinate and stay in peace with even the people who host them. And yeah, so just back to your question. So our intervention as Platform Africa are around tied to three things. One, we're looking at peace building, which we already, I think, they talked extensively about the project of hate speech mitigation and all of that. But we also look at how we can stabilize refugee communities through trainings and skills development programs. So we've been running a lot of like vocational skills program trainings for refugees in the camp under that pillar of our programs. We've been also doing a lot of open technology and STEM programs for students and schools, and also starting science clubs, being able to just bring the practical face of science to people who are who are going to school in the refugee camp. And then we also do educational programs. And on the educational programs, right now, we started doing career guidance for students in the refugee camp. But now we are supported by the Global Changemakers through the small grants program.
Oh, terrific.
And
Yeah.
now we're running this open library, community library that we call the Kenda Together, which is directly translated to learning or studying together.
Okay. Wow. It seems like you've got a lot of projects that are really coming into fruition, and I'm glad that the Young Changemakers platform has supported you in that. Jaiksana, I'm sure we could chat. We could chat for hours. This has been one of the most engaging, and I mean, I've learned a lot just from this one conversation. But I want to sort of shift the conversation towards maybe, given your broad and sort of incredible life experiences, do you have any advice for youth who are hoping to create some form of positive change in their communities?
Yeah, no, I have one philosophy that I think I've held close to myself for a long time, and it's motivated me to do big and small things. And that motivation and that philosophy is that you can do whatever you want to if you want to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you look at people like Greta Thunberg, she's only 16 or 17 years old, but she's able to create this movement around climate justice. And that is because she had the choice to do it. And for me, my motivation to a lot of people and young people is that if you want to do some change, start doing the change already. And it starts by you educating yourself on the issues and the topics that you are, passionate about. And by taking, small steps, organizing a group of people who share in the same ideology, educating yourself more, and like letting that just spill over and grow to whatever you guys can grow it to be. So I always tell people that you can do whatever if you just make the choice to do it. So that's one of the biggest things that I have created, because personally I've had a lot of limitations in my work. One is because the education that I've had in my whole life is I've only had a high school certificate that says that you have graduated high school and you can go to university. And I've not been able to do that, I think, partly because of the war. I was joining Juba University to study journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And then the conflict started off, and I was kicked to Uganda, to the refugee camp. Here, I've been having a lot of issues trying to, first of all, adjust, because the system in Uganda is that you have to go through 2 levels of secondary school to be able to go to university. And so there's what they call the O level, or the ordinary level, and that is from senior 1 to senior 4. And you have to do what they call the A level or the advanced level, which is senior 5 and 6, before you could go to university. South Sudan, the education system is a whole different from Uganda. In South Sudan, you only have to go to O level to be able to go to university. And so there's like a lot of difficulties for me to sort of navigate how I can go back to school here. And sometimes I feel like, okay, some of the things that you're doing are a little bigger or big for you to do because you don't have maybe the qualification or whatever. But just because I've made the choice that I really want to create change, I want to be able to change the environment around me. I've been able to educate myself through the medium of the internet, through the medium of amazing networks like the Global Changemakers.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that without all the qualification that people would set as limitations for themselves, I'm able to reach over 30,000 people in the refugee camp through the programs that we do.
Mm-hmm.
We're able to set up a library, the first library in the refugee camp, where we have, people from the refugee camp from all over coming to, because there's no library that people can go to. And one of the biggest challenges in the refugee camp is access to educational materials and resources. And so just being able to go out there and pursue your dreams is for me one of the biggest things that I've done in my life. And like I said before, you can do anything if you just make the choice to do it.
Yeah, well, like I'm sure you've inspired and motivated a lot of young people who wouldn't have otherwise had their sort of future laid out in front of them unless they've sort of come across your work. So, I mean, that's a real inspiration. And even myself, I can surely take a lot of lessons away from sort of the commitment you've made to yourself into overcome adversity. And it's a real inspiration, and congratulations with the incredible work that you've achieved, Jaiksana. Unfortunately,
Sure,
I think we'll have to give this conversation a bit of a wrap up, but I'd love to, or maybe another one of our co-hosts can also have a chat with you and maybe go down into a bit more about your projects. But I want to, is there any sort of, do you have some core ambitions or personal goals that you'd love to achieve in long term, just to wrap up?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of ambitions. I'm sort of the ambitious type. I am working on studying journalism now, but I've sort of set this goal for myself that in the future, want to run for public office, a political office like the office of the president. And because I feel like politics is a huge machinery of change, but a lot of people are not embracing that. And I think also like my experiences have sort of shaped me in understanding that we really need change. I've seen a lot of things that I feel needs to happen and needs to change. And I've been through a lot of experiences that if I was having the office, I wouldn't allow some of those few things or some of those things to happen. So yeah, my dream is to become president of my country, South Sudan. And I hope that actually one day we have this chat in what they call the J1, which is the office of the president in South Sudan.
No, I wouldn't put it past you. And I guess your voice is being heard, and you're the right person to be able to give a voice for a lot who can't. So yeah, again, Jaiksana, really appreciate your time today, and I hope I can catch up with you soon. It'd be great to meet up again, and I'm sure you're welcome anytime to my place in Kenya. I'm sure there's a lot of work we could collaborate on.
Sure. I mean, it's really good to be on this platform and to just have this chat with you. And definitely we should.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode.
And I really
remember that you can help us have a greater impact by sharing this and encouraging everybody on your social media to take a listen. If you want to reach out, remember that the contact of the co-host is down below in the show notes.
Cheers.
Or feel free to do it on social media at WeAreGCM. We'll be very happy to talk to you and answer any of your questions. Also, remember to follow us and to subscribe to this podcast. See you in the next episode. Take care.